Molly, Brianna, Mia, Archie, Isaac, Jules and Maya. Children whose lives were cut short, whose parents have told us, heartbreakingly in the last couple of years, that the world online played a part in their deaths. The woman in charge of new laws to protect children online is with us live for the first time today. Dame Melanie Dawes is the boss of the internet and broadcasting regulator Ofcom. After the report into the Air India crash that killed more than 50 Brits, the Transport Secretary Heidi Alexander joins us alongside the Conservatives' Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp. And he's left the TARDIS for a steamy new play, Born with Teeth. But could the Doctor Who star, Ncuti Gatwa, play the Time Lord again?
Never say never.
And our team at the desk for the next hour this week, Ian Russell. Molly was his daughter and he's become one of the nation's foremost online safety campaigners. News Queen, Kay Burley, formerly of Sky News, with us on the BBC today. And free speech campaigner and broadcaster too, Inaya Folarin Iman. Welcome to you all.
Thank you.
Morning. Let's start, as we always do, with what's making the news today. The Independent and On Sunday and the Sunday Express both splash on last week's small boats deal between the government and France, questioning whether it will stop the votes and whether it will win any votes. The Sunday Telegraph splashes with a report saying anti-Semitism is rife in the middle classes. And they also have some detail on the plan Heidi Alexander will tell us about later to encourage you to buy electric cars. The Sunday Mirror and the Mail on Sunday both lead with secret reconciliation talks between King Charles and Prince Harry's top aides. And the Observer is focusing on the BBC's handling of Gaza. Melanie Dawes also has that in her in tray. Let's, though, talk about our main subject today, the safety of kids online, and big changes, Ian, coming in terms of the law around this. How big a moment is this, do you think, for people who haven't been following it that closely?
This should be the biggest moment in online safety since social media has been invented. It's later this month that Ofcom will start enforcing the protection of children measures to make the internet safer. And I'm sure you're about to hear from Melanie how it will be revolutionary and things will change. The Ofcom PR is often spun such that it sounds like everything will change for the better in a matter of weeks. But I think it's quite clear that Ofcom as a regulator need to do more than just be good at spinning their PR. They need to act within the bounds of the Act to the strongest possible way. And they're not doing that. They're sitting in the middle, pushed on one side by families who've lost people like me and pushed on the other side by the power of the big tech platforms. And I also think it's really important that Melanie starts to talk back to government because Ofcom is clear about where the Act is weak and she needs to push back and communicate those weaknesses to the government so that we can make change where necessary. OK,
so there are plenty of dilemmas, aren't there, in all of this? I mean, Kay, we know how much this matters to the public and we know from viewers every time we talk about this issue, lots of you get in touch and please do the same today. But how tricky do you think this is for politicians and for regulators trying to grapple with not squeezing out all the excitement and opportunity of the internet, but also keeping people safe?
Yeah, but it's staggeringly difficult, isn't it, Laura? The fact is, technology is moving at such a pace. Whatever the law is saying now will undoubtedly be out of date. I mean, this was first talked about, mooted in 2019. We didn't really know about AI then, did we? No. Now, ChatGPT is something I use every single day, several times a day. So I don't envy what Melanie Dawes has to do. It falls on her shoulders. It's a very challenging position, and I don't know what she's going to say. I'll be interested to see what she does have to say. And
we'll hear in a few minutes. Yeah. But Inaya, there is a potential downside, though, of course, isn't there? If you go too far, you can squeeze out freedom of speech. You can do too much.
Well, I think that's the worry for many free speech campaigners. Undoubtedly, I think, including myself, I have
concerns, substantial concerns about the impact on young people and children. But as we saw when it comes to a platform like X/Twitter, the owners of the platform have radically different ideas about what is and isn't acceptable. Under Jack Dorsey, if you criticise the government strategy on COVID-19 or express gender-critical views on trans rights, you could be kicked off the platform. And now we have a situation under Elon Musk where almost anything goes, which has completely transformed the user experience. So what even the big tech platforms view as acceptable is completely different, and policing that is quite difficult.
Very difficult.
Talk
indeed.
about WhatsApp as well.
Well, and WhatsApp and encrypted messages. There's so much to ask Melanie Dawes about, but throughout this in the last couple of years, we've heard repeatedly in this studio that the heartbreak of the families where things have gone so wrong is so plain. 4 of them told us why they're suing TikTok, convinced their children's death was linked to their experiences on the site. Esther Jai told us how her daughter, Brianna, was caught up in the online world and her killers had watched violent content. Mariano Janine explained how his 14-year-old daughter, Mia, was bullied in an online group chat before taking her own life. After years, new online safety laws came into being in the autumn. Ofcom is the regulator with the job of making the tech platforms stick to those rules. In March, platforms had to start removing illegal content more quickly and reduce the risk of it appearing in the first place. And in a couple of weeks, tech platforms will have to carry out age checks to make sure under 18s don't see harmful material. So will it really make the world safer for kids online? Well, Dame Melanie's with us today, and welcome to the studio. It's good to have you with us. As Kay Burley said, there's so much on your shoulders. We know how much viewers care about this issue, and Ian Russell's just told us this should be the biggest moment for internet safety. But can you guarantee from later this month that children are going to be protected from seeing harmful content online?
Look, it is a really big moment because finally the laws are coming into force. And in fact, some of them are already in force, and we've already opened investigations into 11 companies that are not doing what we think they should be doing. What happens at the end of this month is that we see the wider protections for children come online. And so what we're expecting to see then is that any company that shows material that shouldn't be available to under 18s, pornography, suicide and self-harm material, that should be either removed from their service, or they're going to need highly effective age checks to screen out under 18s. There's a lot more than that, but this is a big moment. And we're already starting to see some change, but we're under no illusions at Ofcom about the really quite challenging path ahead.
But how on earth is that actually going to work? So you can understand with a porn site that advertises itself that way, where there might be an age check that might already be there. But if it's about X or Instagram or Facebook and a 14-year-old goes online and sees something, how's it actually physically going to work to make sure they don't see harmful things? How are they going to check?
Well, look, first, just to say, porn companies don't have age checks at the moment, and that's what we're changing. We saw the biggest porn company in the world that owned Pornhub, which is a site that's widely used in the UK, announced a few weeks ago that they are going to follow Ofcom's rules. They haven't done that for any other jurisdiction.
But for those ordinary platforms that are in all our lives in such frequent ways, how on earth is it going to work?
Yeah, so look, there's going to be lots of different ways that companies can do this. So some companies will decide to go 18 plus only. But they'll need age checks to make sure that that really happens in practice. And some may put an age check around particular types of material like pornography or other adult content. What we've said to the industry is, you decide. We've set out about 5 or 6 things that we think can work, like the facial checks and using things where you've already been checked for your age, like credit cards or open banking. We've said you decide what works for your platform, but we will be checking whether it's effective. And those that don't put in those checks will hear from us with enforcement action.
Isn't the problem, though, as you've just said, you've said to the companies, you decide. And when you listen to campaigners like Ian, they don't want the companies to decide. They've seen how the companies have, in some cases, behaved in the last few years. And they think you should decide and the government should decide. And they should say how this is going to happen. And you've given them the power to design the system themselves.
What we've said is that there are some things that work and some things that don't work. So there's no question of any company out there deciding whether or not to put in an age check if they've got adult material on their site. That is now absolutely required by law. We've already opened up enforcement action, Laura. I think it's important just to say, we mean business, and we've already demonstrated that.
But when it comes to harmful content, illegal stuff is against the law, and you've already changed the rules on that. But harmful content, whether that's about self-harm or young girls seeing material about eating disorders, or things that might be intimate images that aren't actually against the law, how are you going to make sure that these companies are just not showing these to young people? Because you're giving them a lot of power in how they do it.
No, we're not giving them that much power, actually. What I'm saying is that when they're putting in age checks, they need to work out what's going to work on their service. But let me be really clear what we are demanding to protect children, what does come in force at the end of this month. They're going to need to tame those algorithms so that not just porn, but suicide and self-harm material must not be shown, but also violent content, dangerous challenges, misogyny, all of that must not be fed actively to kids on their feeds. We've spoken a lot to children. I was with some teenagers earlier this week. And so we're also introducing requirements to make it a lot easier for kids to control what's going on for them online, but not to be brought into really toxic chats that they then can't get out of.
But to be really clear for parents, though, you're not blocking that kind of material. You're not forcing them to block it or take it down. And campaigners...
Can I just say, you know, they must not show that to children. And we are going to be testing this. So you know, it isn't the case that they'll have choice over whether or not children are able to see this kind of content in future. The law is very clear on some types of material in particular, and Ofcom's codes are very clear. These algorithms have got to change very significantly in order to meet our rules.
But there are significant worries among campaigners and experts and even some people in law enforcement about what is also not covered by the new codes. The rules don't cover messaging apps like WhatsApp, for example.
They do, actually. They do.
But they don't cover encrypted messaging in the way that, you know, what's to stop in the rules? What's to stop intimate pictures flying around a playground on everybody's smartphone?
So look, if you're using platforms where it isn't encrypted, and Snapchat, for example, is not encrypted, then absolutely messaging it should be properly quality controlled by the platforms. And I should say, by the way, you said earlier that intimate images are allowed. They're not. Actually, intimate image abuse and the sharing of illegal images that have been procured without consent, shared without consent, that's illegal for adults as well as for children. So I think maybe some of this is more covered than perhaps some people are realising.
But the issue comes back to again and again, though, is not material that's illegal. It's about things that might be harmful for people to see. And the rules, as we understand it, don't block dangerous or risky challenges. Now, the families suing TikTok believe that risky challenges that their children got involved with contributed to leading to their deaths. Why don't the new rules block dangerous or risky challenges?
So dangerous challenges where children are being encouraged to do something that's really risky to them, and as you say, in some cases has meant that some children have lost their lives as a result of that. That is covered by our rules. We say that violent content, misogyny, and dangerous challenges must not be pushed towards kids in their feeds.
But that's different to blocking it. So why aren't they blocked altogether so that parents can be completely confident kids just won't see those things?
Well, so what the law says, what Parliament decided was that there should be an absolute block on suicide and self-harm material and pornography for under 18s. And then what we've done is also add to that other types of content that we think is really harmful for children. And it's because we've listened to parents about this, by the way, that we've got that comprehensive picture. That must not be pushed actively in the feeds, because it's the virality of these algorithms that means that children say they lose control very quickly about what's going on. And look, we are going to be testing this. We're going to be looking at this at Ofcom, and I want campaigners and experts, we're going to be talking to children a lot over the next few months to find out whether what the platforms say they're going to do will actually become a reality, because we've had 20 years when this hasn't happened, and there's a big cultural change that we're trying to push across Silicon Valley, frankly.
And it is a huge job. I mean, do you see yourself then as being in opposition to Silicon Valley? You're trying to make them change.
We are trying to make them change. And, you know, I think it is a very big moment for the industry, a very serious moment. And the reason why people are making changes, though, is because they've seen that Ofcom's ready to enforce. That's where we prioritise that in the spring and have opened up really quite a lot of investigations already. So, you know, there'll be more to come.
But there are serious concerns, though, about some other loopholes. And I just briefly do want to go through some of them, because the rules also don't fully cover chatbots. Now, there's a big survey out this morning suggests that kids are spending more and more time on these kinds of AI-generated apps. And it's really serious. It's not just about protecting children. The government's terrorism czar, Jonathan Hall, has also warned that there is a loophole here where malign individuals might use chatbots. Do you accept that there's a big gap in your rules because it doesn't fully cover AI?
So look, there are some forms of new AI which are going to be covered, but there are some that may not. And I think this is a general point here, that as the internet keeps changing, as new forms of AI come in very rapidly, there may need to be some changes to the legislation to cover that.
So there
but
may have to be more laws.
meanwhile, we are clear that a chatbot on, say, Snapchat or Instagram is covered by the rules, because essentially if they're engaging with a young person or an adult, that's caught just in the same way as if a human being was doing it.
But a senior committee of MPs has warned just this week there's another very serious loophole when it comes to misinformation. So the Technology Committee just looked at what happened around the riots after the Southport tragedy, and they judged that by not covering misinformation, and I want to quote this from the committee because it's very strong, they said the Act fails to keep UK citizens safe from a core and pervasive online harm.
Yeah.
Don't politicians have to get on with it and give you the power to crack down on misinformation as well?
Well, look, my job is to implement the rules that Parliament's already given us to protect us from illegal harm and on these wider protections.
But as the regulator, you have a very powerful voice in the industry and you can send signals. You don't have to wait for legislation. You could signal right here, right now, today, that you think some of these things are not acceptable.
Look, I'm not a politician, and I think it's incredibly important that Ofcom respects the role that we have, which is to implement the laws that we've been given. If Parliament decides to widen those towards mis and disinformation or wider issues around addiction for kids, for example, then of course Ofcom stands ready to implement that. But I think it's very important that we focus on the job we've been given.
But for people to have confidence in Ofcom as a regulator, you know, there are holes in this. You might think there are holes a bit like Swiss cheese in these rules and regulations. If you want people watching today to have confidence as a regulator, how can they when there are so many loopholes?
I think what people, I hope, will see and get more confident about in the coming months is that we're starting to drive change in the things I think many parents and young people watching now do really care about, which is these algorithms being tamed, children not being able to get onto porn sites, stumble across pornography at very young ages, 8, 9, 10 years old. That's been normalised over the last 20 years, and it really, really matters. And that's what we're really driving at the moment.
OK, well, it's great to have you with us this morning at what is a big moment, and it'd be great to have you back in a few months once people have got more of an idea about whether or not the new system is working. I do want to briefly ask you about the BBC, because Ofcom has authority over the broadcasters and the BBC. You said the organisation has questions to answer over its Glastonbury coverage and the broadcast of some of Bob Vylan, a band. You can see a picture of them here. Their anti-Israeli chants. Some senior BBC staff have stepped back from their roles, but are you satisfied with the explanations you've been given?
Well, look, I think it's very frustrating that the BBC has had some own goals in this area with the Gaza documentary and then with the Glastonbury coverage. And, you know, it does start to erode public trust and confidence. I think I would say that, above all, what frustrates me and others is that when these things go wrong, it can take a long time for the BBC to see that something's happened when everybody else was there, you know, within a matter of hours. So I would say to the BBC, I think they need to get a grip quicker, get these reports and investigations concluded sooner. Otherwise, there is a real risk of a sort of loss of confidence in the BBC, which is a shame because, you know, what the BBC does day by day is bring some really high-quality journalism to our screens and to the radio, which is what we need.
Do you have faith in the BBC leadership to get a grip?
Well, look, I think it's a tough job to be at the top of the BBC. I think the board and the senior team at the BBC, you know, need to, as I said, get a bit quicker, actually, at recognising when something's gone wrong, and, you know, get a grip of the actions that they need to take, or there is going to be, you know, a real risk that the BBC loses confidence in what it delivers for the public.
But I just wonder if you have faith that they will.
Well, look, we're going to have to see over the next week. I think we're expecting the Gaza report early in the coming week. We've asked a lot of questions about the Glastonbury coverage. The BBC's got a lot on its plate that it needs to address. I think it is important to also recognise that they do deliver a very high-quality job for the public, usually, but it's these own goals that are very frustrating, which they need to be quicker to get onto, quicker to grip and quicker to put right.
Okay, Dame Melanie, thanks so much for coming in. It's great to have you with us. And as I say, it would be great to have you back in a few months once we've got a handle on the new online safety system. We know how much our viewers care about this issue. Thanks so much for your time. And I should say, if you feel that you or anyone you know could do with some help or advice on any of the issues that we have discussed, of any of the risks of life online, there is a whole range of organisations and websites that can offer you advice and support. And there's a list of the kind of groups who can give you help on the BBC's Action Line page. The address there is up on your screen for you now. Well, Cabinet Minister Heidi Alexander is with us for the government today. Transport Secretary. First time we've had you in the studio too. It must be one of those days. Thank you for coming in. Let's start with online safety. Now, it was interesting. Dame Melanie Dawes said there may have to be new rules in future. We've had in the last couple of months some really quite strong hints, actually, from government that there will be extra laws on the way. Do you think there'll need to be more, given some of the loopholes that we've already discussed this morning?
So I think the changes that are coming in on the 25th of July are really important, and it is now for the technology companies to put in those really robust safeguards to make sure that they are verifying the ages of people that are using their platforms, and they are not pumping that harmful content into the feeds of kids on platforms such as Instagram, TikTok. We are very clear as a government that this is the foundation for a safer online experience for children, but it is not the end of the conversation. And so Peter Kyle, the Technology Secretary, has been clear that he wants to look at things such as addictive habits and how we create healthier habits for children online, in the same way as we talk about healthier physical habits for children. And so, yes, we will keep under review what is required, but we also need to equip schools and parents to help better understand the online world and to make sure that we do absolutely everything we can to keep children safe.
Some of our viewers, though, you mentioned schools, think actually you could do something straight away that would be really simple, that would, for many hours of the day, at least protect kids from the world online and things going wrong then. You could ban phones in schools. Some parents now are even taking the government to court to try to make that happen in England. We had a word with William Orr Ewing, who's one of the parents who's actually suing the Department of Education. This is what he had to say.
I'm just a dad coming at this. I'm a former teacher, so I know schools as well. And we've appointed lawyers to come up with the legal arguments. The two legal arguments, one of them is about the human rights of children and to the extent to which they're being undermined by access to smartphones. But the other one is called irrationality, and that is that the government's stated intention is to get smartphones out of schools. That's what they've said over the last few years, but it's just not working. So that's why we've taken the legal route as opposed to just head teachers and parents doing this on their own. Why not just do this?
So we need to get the balance right. Lots of schools have controls in place already where they remove smartphones from kids during the school day. So lots of head teachers are determining what is the right policy. Some mums and dads also want their kids to have a phone on their way to school so that if something happens when they're on the bus, you know, those sorts of things can, you know, they can feel confident that their child has a means of communicating. And so we've got to get the balance right. But as I say, schools do have powers to take decisions about what is right for their pupils and their school.
But I suppose the point that many parents might feel, and many head teachers might say this as well, is because it's not actually the law, they're in a bit of a tricky position. Wouldn't it be easier, some of them want the government just to make it the law, so it's clear, so they know there isn't this kind of, you know, uncertain picture?
So Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, is reviewing the guidance to schools. I think that is important that we do that. We are going to keep this issue under review.
So you might back
Peter
that
Kyle,
in future?
Well, Peter Kyle has been clear that there are a whole range of different issues that he wants to continue to look at because the online safety of children is one of the top priorities of this government, and you can't. When you listen to people like Ian and his experience with the loss of his daughter, Molly, we're not going to be a government that sits back and waits on this. We want to address it. And so that's why Peter Kyle is very clear that these issues are being kept under review.
It's interesting, though, because politicians have, a lot of people might think, sat back and taken a long time. And in fact, actually, you were ahead of the curve. In 2012, Heidi Alexander, you introduced the Private Members Bill, trying to get the law changed so that YouTube and other platforms took down videos of gang violence that your constituents at the time were seeing. And you were worried about that. Does it frustrate you that actually you yourself were making this case more than 10 years ago? I
really struggled to persuade the Conservative government at the time to look into this issue. What was very clear to me was that activity in the online world was fermenting what was happening on the streets when it came to serious youth violence. And I had parents come to me to say, you know, my son has had his phone nicked on the way home from school, and he said, Dad, you can go online and see the people who are doing it because they're crowing about it, they're glamorising it online. And so, you know, I think what Melanie Dawes was saying earlier from Ofcom about the fact that they've looked at a range of harmful content. Obviously, the Online Safety Act did not give Ofcom the powers to deal with harmful but legal content. And so, you know, if you are inciting, you know, serious violence, we've seen, haven't we, following the Southport riots, that some individuals have actually gone to prison because they were inciting racially motivated violence, suggesting that, you know, asylum hotels where asylum seekers are housed should be burnt to the ground, women and children in there. And so, you know, I think we have to recognise that, you know, if things are illegal online, then the fact that you're sat behind a phone or a computer screen is not going to protect you from the law. But we do need to look carefully about the wider issues relating to legal content, but which is very harmful. And that's why these changes on the 25th of July are so important in terms of stopping that content that is related to pornography, suicide, self-harms, eating disorders from being pumped into the feeds of children, because I think it is toxic at the moment.
And just before we move on to your brief, because we do want to talk about transport, Melanie Dawes said that the BBC had a risk of losing public confidence because of the pace in which it's been dealing with issues over Gaza and Israel. Do you think that's right?
I think that the BBC need to do a rapid investigation of what has happened in relation to the Glastonbury incident. They need to do it thoroughly, because at the end of the day, the BBC needs to maintain the trust of its audience. OK, let's talk then about your job as Transport Secretary. One of the things that has happened recently is the dreadful Air India plane crash in which 52 British people died. We had the preliminary report from the Indian authorities in the last 48 hours. What did you think of what you saw there? Well, I welcome that report, but we shouldn't speculate further on what the cause of the incident was. The cause is still unknown. It was reassuring to see that at this stage, the Indian authorities have said that there isn't cause for concern in relation to the aircraft or the engines, and I think that will be reassuring to people who are flying. I would obviously like to express my condolences to the family of the 52 British nationals in particular who lost their lives in this incident, and I look forward to the full report when it's published. And what is the UK government doing to get answers for these families? I mean, are there British investigators in India helping with the investigation? What are you doing? Yeah, so because there were 52 British nationals who lost their lives, we did send out investigators from the Air Accident Investigation Branch for a few days. They have now returned. We stand ready to assist the Indian authorities if they require that from us. Of course, we have the CAA, the Civil Aviation Authority in the UK, that ensures that we have some of the strictest and most robust standards when it comes to the safety of our airspace in the UK and the safety of the airlines that operate to and from UK airports. And are you satisfied that the Indian authorities are doing a good job at getting to the bottom of what happened here? On the basis of what I have seen so far, yes. But we do stand ready to provide any assistance. The US National Transportation Safety Board is also involved on an ongoing basis. OK. You would like all of us to buy more electric cars? I would. And at the moment, only 20% or so of new cars sold in this country are electric. They are expensive. They can be a bit of a hassle. If you live in a flat or you don't have a driveway, if you're not lucky enough to have a big, long driveway, it's not easy to plug your car in.
So how are you going to get people to shell out the cash?
So there is some good news. In June of this year, 1 in 4 cars that was sold in the UK was an electric vehicle, and that over this year, that has gone up 35% on the previous year. So we're moving in the right direction, but we do need to make it easier and cheaper for people to buy an electric vehicle. So today we're announcing really big investment, £63 million in charging infrastructure across the country, £25 million for councils, so that people like me who don't have a driveway, I live in a terrace house, if I had an EV, I'd be asking myself questions about how I would get the electric cable across to the car.
So you don't have one. So the Transport Secretary doesn't have an electric car, but you're telling everyone else to have one.
I don't have an electric car, Laura, but I'm a lot like, you know, millions of people in this country who I bought a new car about 6 years ago. I'm thinking about the next car that I will purchase, and it will definitely be an electric vehicle. I'm not in the habit of changing my car on a yearly basis, expensive as it is. And so that's why we're making £25 million available to councils so that they can provide financial support to households who want to put in a cross-pavement gully so that you can safely run the cable across the pavement. We're also investing £30 million in depot charging infrastructure and also making sure that public organisations like the NHS have the charging infrastructure there as well.
But making it easier to plug in might not be enough. I mean, are you going to do something a bit more radical? There were reports this morning suggesting actually there might be hundreds of millions of pounds available to give people grants. So are you going to help people shell out for one, and how much cash might be on the table?
So we are going to be making some announcements later this week on how we make it more affordable for people to buy an electric vehicle.
So there will be grants.
We recognise that the high upfront purchase cost of EVs is something, alongside the charging infrastructure, that puts people off.
So there will be grants for people to buy a new car?
I'll be making an announcement
Well, there's some reporting of it this morning. You don't think it was the final details, but can you confirm you are going to give grants to people to maybe of thousands of pounds in order to help them buy electric cars?
I can guarantee to your viewers that we will be making it cheaper for those who do want to make the switch to an electric vehicle to do so, and we will make sure that the charging infrastructure is there for them so that they can make the journeys that they want to make.
OK, Heidi Alexander, and you've said you're going to be one of them, but whether a Cabinet Minister would apply for the grant, I don't know.
I don't think that would be appropriate, Laura.
OK, Heidi, thank you very much, Steve, for coming in. It's good to have you with us for the first time on a Sunday. As ever, remember, we want to know what you think, so do get busy emailing us, kuenssberg@bbc.co.uk, or if you're social media inclined, you can use the hashtag BBC Laura Kay, and the WhatsApp number is there for you on the screen, 08000 282 161. And particularly on this issue of online harm and safety for children, we've heard so much from our viewers about it in the last couple of years. Ian, I must come firstly to you. I know you will have been listening intently to what Melanie Dawes said from Ofcom. You know, she is saying with conviction this is going to change. She is going to go after companies who break the rules. What did you make of what she had to say?
It sounds promising, doesn't it? But in all these cases, the proof of the pudding is in what happens. I've heard so many things from platforms, from government officials, from regulators, and it's what happens, because sadly, the sort of content that Molly was looking at this time, 8 years ago, that led to her death is still available online. Still available online, and barely any harder to find. And young people can find it quite easily. So it's really easy to judge how effective this will be, because we, the Molly Rose Foundation, the charity we set up in her name, will be publishing research later in the year that sets a sort of datum for how easy it is to find harm, and we'll be monitoring how that harm is reduced, because that's a measure as to how well the platforms are doing. It's a measure to how well the regulator is doing, and it's a measure as to how soon the government must introduce measures, serious measures, to make sure it is improved.
And it's very clear listening to both of them this morning that there is more legislation on the way. Whatever it is, both Dame Melanie and Heidi Alexander were sort of, making it quite clear there might be more to come. But Inaya, one of the things about how Ofcom is approaching this, and it was striking here, are saying, well, the platforms will decide how. given the track record of many of those platforms, and you were telling us how Elon Musk has shifted the rules on X, as Meta has done dramatically, do you think that's the right approach, to leave it up to them?
Well, I think that when we talk about things like removing illegal content, it sounds very clear. People think about child abuse or promoting terrorism, but the reality is oftentimes not that clear. So, for example, it's illegal now under the online harms to promote false information or stirring up racial hatred. Well, actually, outside of the online world, in the offline world, we're having a debate about where those lines actually are. Oftentimes, the police and the courts are very ambiguous and inconsistent about what constitutes, for example, hostility towards a religion to actually hatred towards a group, or things to do with the discussions around gender identity and all different types of thorny moral and cultural issues. Actually policing them in the offline world is increasingly difficult. And so then handing that power or empowering these tech companies to then police those things to which we haven't collectively agreed where the boundaries are, I think is increasingly difficult. So we talk a lot about children. I think, understandably, I think most people completely sympathise with that, but it invariably affects adults. And I do worry about online regulation increasingly becoming a kind of catch-all solution to what are deeply difficult social problems within society around social fabric, alienation, mental health issues. And I think that interview really revealed that there are big limits to the extent to which we can really do things about these issues solely through regulation.
Kay, I mean, maybe we focus too much then in the sense of what the rules can be, and actually the questions are as much for us as a society.
Yeah, I felt that, I mean, I like Melanie Dawes and I wouldn't want her job. I mean, it's as I said, it's a very
that's
challenging...
not part of your future career plans after you've left Sky. You're not going to Ofcom.
Absolutely not. I'm absolutely not. And as I said, I do admire her, but I think she created more questions than she answered as part of that interview. She's investigating 11 companies, she said. Then what? What's going to happen to those companies after that? Age checks are going to be put in place. We know that kids can get around age checks quite easily. They do it in lots of different ways. Who is actually going to be policing what these tech companies are doing? Ofcom, OK, how are they going to be testing those platforms when they discover they may be breaking the rules? What will they be doing with them then? But can we really trust tech firms on harmful content and controversial?
You're even asking.
Well, would you? I mean,
No, I wouldn't. And I said to Heidi Alexander's point, she said harmful but not illegal. Who's actually going to decide that?
Well, and that, of course, was one of the big controversies when this was all debated under a Conservative government. So the original plans, just to remind everybody, contained rules on harmful content that was legal for adults being made to become offline, but actually that got dropped after a huge big hoo-ha. In fact, Kemi Badenoch was one of the politicians who spoke very forcefully against the idea of taking down
Didn't want to legislate against hurt feelings.
Yeah, well, there was a big debate about free speech. I mean, do you, Ian, obviously this is such an important issue for you, do you have sympathy with the regulator and the politicians here, or do you think actually they've fudged it?
Of course I have sympathy, because it's a difficult job, particularly Melanie's job, stuck in the middle as regulator. I think it's really important to remember, though, that harmful content isn't an individual post necessarily. Harmful content becomes harmful when it is combined. Hundreds of posts are combined. We know Molly saw 2,100 harmful posts in the last 6 months of her life on Instagram alone. And the algorithms, it's the platform's processes that combine content to create harm that must be tackled. So it's that needs to happen. And it's, you know, we heard in terms of Melanie's response to the BBC, it's taken the BBC a long time to do something. We've heard from Heidi that we're not a government that sits back and waits. There is the essence of the problem. We are moving too slowly to keep pace with tech. It's all possible because we can strengthen the bill and we can do things, but it will take Keir Starmer to do that in the next session.
Can I just jump in on the BBC? Because you know, it's very fashionable to bash the BBC, and we've seen it this morning.
Never goes out of fashion.
Well, BBC make mistakes. We all make mistakes. As far as I can see, what happened at Glastonbury was they stayed on something they shouldn't. That was a decision that was made in the control room. It was a mistake The BBC has apologised. The suggestion that they need to react quickly with their reports and findings. If they did that, then it would be, oh, they haven't done enough and that finding isn't in enough detail. So I'm not up for this BBC bashing. Just wanted to say that.
Well, that's on the record from Kay Burley.
Just a quick point from Heidi Alexander. I think that this is the question about the legal but harmful. Already she was alluding to Peter Carl examining other areas such as healthy habits, addictive habits. I mean, you can already see how something that was originally conceived of as really serious things like self-harm and eating disorders to expanding out to other things like healthy habits and encouraging social media to promote those things to children. There's clear ambiguity, and I think a lot of people would see that as potentially a slippery slope.
Ian, do you think there'll be more legislation on the other side of the summer?
Yeah. I absolutely think there'll be more legislation.
Have they given you that hint, if you're allowed to say?
We're hearing lots of things from lots of places, and it all seems to be pointing towards a tightening of the legislation. But what is essential is that the government delivers. They're a government that's spent a year not getting to grips and failing to deliver on so many areas. On this election promise, they have to deliver. It has to be meaningful change and not the sticking plaster change that might come along.
Shouldn't there be more guidance for parents as well?
Yeah.
More guidance, education from the bottom, so everyone can learn how better to deal with the online harms that we all face. And regulation from the top to make the companies change their practices, because that's what counts, getting the platforms to change and remove harm where it exists in situ on their platforms.
Well, we will see what happens, and I know you will all be watching carefully. We'll be watching here too, and I know everybody at home will also be watching carefully what happens, and in terms of the experiences that we all have online, of course, because this is a huge issue for us as a society. And how do you not miss out on the advantages and opportunities of technology, but also protect people from the worst excesses of the internet? Now, coming up in a few minutes, something completely different. We'll be talking to former Doctor Who, Ncuti Gatwa, and Edward Bluemel, his co-star in a new West End play, Born with Teeth, which sounds rather steamy.
Electric and spicy, and I think there is something for everyone in there. Electric and spicy, did you like that?
I loved that.
Well, it's no secret that the Conservatives aren't having a good time like those two are. They're having rather a hard time losing voters to Nigel Farage's Reform UK. And they've been losing some of their own politicians to Reform too. Kemi Badenoch, their old leader, gave them short shrift.
There are a lot of people who come into politics just to play the game of politics, and they will follow polls and defect wherever they can, like they do in banana republics, to wherever they think that they can win. We have to do more than win. We have to be ready with a plan.
Well, Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, is back with us this morning. Your leader accusing 4 of your former MPs of behaving as if they're in a banana republic. We can have a look at them. Sir Jake Berry, Sir David Jones, Ross Thompson and Anne-Marie Morris, all were former Tory MPs. 2 of them were in the cabinet. This is starting to look quite a popular thing to do for politicians to walk away from the Tories and join Reform, isn't it?
Well, I don't think so. We've had sort of probably 300, 400, 500 people who've been MPs over the last 10 years or so. So this is a very small number. Look, I think clearly Reform has superficial attractions to people who are frustrated. But what they don't have are sort of credible and properly thought through problems to solutions to our country's problems. They've got slogans, but they don't have credible plans. And when it comes to things like welfare, Nigel Farage is proposing to lift the 2-child benefit cap, massively increase welfare spending, which is extremely irresponsible and would lead to higher taxes. Those are things that no authentic Conservative should be getting behind.
But weren't they authentic Conservatives then? I mean, Jake Berry was in the cabinet. In fact, he was in the cabinet with you and with Kemi Badenoch. I think we can look, here's your cabinet snap from the time. There we are. There's Sir Jake Berry now in the front row, Kemi Badenoch there, and then you in the back row. So are these not credible, authentic Conservatives?
Look, I think what is not credible or authentic are Reform's policies, which
don't have
the detail to fix our country's problems.
But your colleagues believe that they do. Your former colleagues believe they do.
Well, I think they're wrong, right? I mean, Nigel Farage does not have detailed, credible policies to fix immigration issues. We're the ones who tabled a properly thought-out deportation bill to get control of our border, which Labour voted against. That was Conservatives who tabled that. And when it comes to welfare, you know, Kemi gave a whole speech about getting welfare under control last week, whereas Nigel Farage, by contrast, proposes to increase welfare spending by removing the 2-child cap, so people with 4, 5, 6 kids get subsidised by hard-working taxpayers. That is wrong, and we disagree with it.
But why are some of your former colleagues and many people who used to vote for the Conservatives, why do they agree with him and not with you?
Well, you'd have to ask Jake Berry what was motivating him. Obviously, Kemi, in her speech, was talking about the fact there might be a certain amount of bandwagon jumping going on, but we're going to stay the course. We're going to work out a programme of credible policies. We've done that in part already, so the British public can see in 4 years' time you've got sort of rather empty slogans on the one side, but credible, properly thought out policies from the Conservatives on the other. And you'll certainly see a difference on welfare.
But you must have thought about, though, why, for your colleagues and for some of your former supporters in the country at large, why are you not getting through with them? You must have thought about it, Chris Philp. Why are they not listening? Why don't they think what you're putting on the table is credible?
Look, we suffered a very significant general election defeat just a year ago, and it takes time to rebuild trust. You would expect that. Now, the Labour government have sort of collapsed unexpectedly quickly with these massive tax rises, which they promised they weren't going to bring forward. They're actually clearly going to have even more tax rises this autumn because they failed to control public spending and because the economy is now shrinking under Labour. And it just means, you know, we need a bit more time to get our programme developed and presented. But we are doing that work right now, and you saw it in Kemi's speech on welfare last Thursday, which is a real point of difference between us and Reform. We want to reduce welfare so we can reduce taxes. Reform, by contrast, want to increase welfare spending, which means only one thing, higher taxes.
One of the things that is a difference between you and the Labour Party is whether or not to ban phones in schools. Now, you are still trying to do this in Parliament, and there'll be likely to be votes on it again in the autumn. Do you wish you'd done it in office and actually changed the law rather than just give head teachers guidance saying, get phones out of classrooms? Should you have done it?
Yeah, frankly, yes. And we're now saying we want to legislate to do that. We're constructively tabling amendments to do this in Parliament, putting it to a vote. It's a great shame Labour are voting against it. And as a dad myself, I am really concerned about this, and I don't want, like, my own children who are on the cusp of becoming teenagers to get addicted by social media apps and by smartphones. It's a really serious concern, although I think we are moving in the right direction now that Ofcom are implementing the Online Safety Act, which the last government passed. But I share Ian Russell's concern, and they do need to go faster in getting these codes of practice actually implemented.
And just in terms of the BBC, you were very outspoken in your criticism of the BBC over Glastonbury. You said that the police should investigate and prosecute the BBC for broadcasting the performance. Should the BBC staff who were involved in that coverage really be prosecuted?
Well, I think inciting violence, which is what that singer did, is a criminal offence itself, in my view, and the police, I believe, are looking at that. And broadcasting that is an offence as well. And I expect the police to apply the law to everybody, including the BBC. That feed ran, as Kay Burley said a minute ago, for a very long, really quite a long time. They could have cut it. They should have cut it. And I think where the law is broken, the police should police that.
So you do think that there could be and should be prosecutions of people at the BBC?
There should be an investigation. And if in the police's opinion and the Crown Prosecution Service's opinion, there is a reasonable prospect of conviction, then it should be taken to court. That's the right process, and they should go through that, for sure. There's no exemption just because it's the BBC. OK, Chris Philp, Shadow Home Secretary, always good to have you with us in the studio on a Sunday. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. Thank you. Well, next week, our last show of the summer, we are expecting to be joined by Sir Ed Davey, the Lib Dem leader, and also the leader of Reform, Nigel Farage. So it may be that our last show of the summer has two of the leaders of the smaller parties. So get ready for that. But get ready for something else now. Get ready to be entertained. We're about to meet a rising star of his generation, the actor Ncuti Gatwa, who recently walked away from Doctor Who. But with his fellow actor, Edward Bluemel, are playing two different stars from hundreds of years ago. They're playing William Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe, Will and Kit. And they've always been rumoured, Marlowe that is, to have been the real genius behind some of Shakespeare's works. Their new show, Born with Teeth, is starting soon in London's West End, and it delves into the real-life intrigue and rivalry between the pair at a very dangerous time for artists in the Elizabethan era. So the question is, have they been doing their homework to get ready for the first night?
We don't know whether in real life they had met or knew each other, but this is the what if, the ultimate what if. We did have a research week where we tried to get through a lot of the dates, a lot of the information. 70% has stuck. I'm not saying 100. But it was really great to get to know the world because it's such a dangerous time that they're living in as well, politically. And there's a lot of religious persecution.
Yeah, so it's really scary. I mean, a scary time.
Scary times. And Will comes from a Catholic family. We don't know whether he was Catholic.
Yeah, there was lots of sort of rumours about his family. We have someone who is potentially a spy, potentially working for the Queen, very Protestant, being put together with a sort of real rival of his that maybe he might also have something over in terms of sort of religion and all of that danger.
Makes for an interesting cat and mouse game.
Well, right. Rivals, friends, more than that?
I think.
That's some
Is the
eyebrow raise.
question mark?
A little bit of everything. Sometimes
Is the question
sometimes
mark?
it's just on a knife edge between, you know, hate and love, and certainly lust as well. It could apply to sort of any rivalry, any love story, any sort of hate story as well, and their sort of connection is one that's sort of electric and spicy, and I think there is something for everyone in there. Electric and spicy, did you like that?
I loved that. Brilliant.
Just in case the camera didn't catch it, there was a little wink there between
there
the two,
was.
just out of the corner of your eye. And it starts in a few weeks' time, so you're still in rehearsals. I've got to ask you, have you learnt all your lines yet?
They are coming along, Laura.
That's a politician's answer.
Yeah. They're coming, well, you know, when in Rome.
So everyone watching today will know both of you from lots of different projects that you've been in. Obviously, sex education, obviously for you, shooting for Doctor Who.
Who are you?
I'm the Doctor. You don't have to stand over there. Come and have a look. It's called the TARDIS.
Why did you walk away?
Because I'm getting old and my body was tired. My body, my knee, and I've now just started doing some ballet. So I'm making really great decisions here. It's the most amazing job in the world. It's a job that any actor would dream of. And because it's so good, it's strenuous. It takes a lot out of you, physically, emotionally, mentally. And so it was time.
But would you ever pop back with the mysteries of time travel? Because they do. You know, David Tennant keeps turning up again and again and again.
They do.
Can you ever imagine doing that?
Never say never.
I think that's almost a yes. Maybe if it was the right, maybe if it was the right script. And in terms, Edward, for you of sex education and some of the other things that you've done, where does going back to the stage for this fit in your master plan, if you do have a master plan of all the projects you're doing?
Yeah, it's so exciting. I haven't been on stage in about 8 years, and I was sort of getting this sort of slow, sinister panic that I wouldn't know how to do it. And I was too scared.
He's brilliant.
And so when this came across my desk and Ncuti had already been cast, I was like, this is exactly the sort of thing that I want to like dive back into. I think it's like dynamic, it's fun.
And certainly, you know, TV stars going on stage can help widen that appeal for things that might seem quite sort of highfalutin. Is that part of why you're going back to the stage, to try and bring new audiences in?
I wouldn't sort of like paint myself like what I'm doing is saving theatre. But like, yeah, love working in theatre and would encourage everyone to come along to this show.
But your career has exploded in such a big way, and I think people do look to you in lots of ways. And I think also lots of people were really excited to see you in Eurovision, and then at the last minute you decided not to go ahead with it. Can I ask why you did that? Was that because of some of the strains that you'd been under? You didn't want to be on such a big platform, or what was it about?
That one, it all panned out very interestingly. I pulled out of it a long time before it was announced. And it was announced when it was announced. I don't know why. But I was just very busy. Just had a lot of work schedules, a lot of press around the roses, around Doctor, around... Yeah, there was just a lot of press.
Because there was some speculation that, because there was controversy about Israel being part of the competition, and there was speculation that that was why you had decided not to take part, because you have before been one of many people who's expressed a lot of support for the Palestinians. Was that part of your reasoning?
No, I was just very busy.
Did you watch Eurovision?
I didn't, no. Was busy.
And in terms then, let's just go back to the play. What is the one thing that you hope people will take from it, Edward?
I hope that people walk away with a sort of maybe a reignited sort of passion for Shakespeare, and particularly Marlowe, who I think, you know, something that the play covers is sort of how he, despite being so great, has fallen into the shadow a little bit. Do you hope he'll be resurrected as a bigger presence because of this play?
Yeah, I hope so. It's a really great story between these two huge literary icons, and it's very exciting to imagine what could have happened in a room together. I hope both their works are expanded to audiences, and they just get a great story.
Great. Well, it's been great to have you both of you with us, telling us a snippet of this story, and the play starts in a few weeks, and everyone will wish you all the best with it. Thanks so much with your time for today.
Thank you.
Well, they look like they're going to have a good time. So probably have a good time if you go to see it. Is there, though, something else going on? You know, they're doing a play about Shakespeare and Marlowe, even though they're sort of two of the hottest young actors of their generation. And then this summer, the kind of cultural obsession seems to be about Oasis and even about the anniversary of Live Aid. Today, 40 years. There's a lot of sort of nostalgia about. I mean, Kay, I think you're going to Oasis. I think you've got some of the golden tickets.
I have.
Have you got no new ideas?
Oh, I think, oh, come on, Oasis. Although, well, my tickets are for the beginning of August.
Right.
I don't know if they're still going to be together by the beginning of August. I certainly hope that they are, but apparently they're in separate hotel rooms.
Yes.
As soon as they go off stage, they go their separate ways. They're kept apart until they come back together on stage again. Just going to have to roll with it, aren't we?
Oh, groan, groan.
Sorry.
But in terms of, you know, where people like to spend their time thinking about the past, you know, at Wimbledon we looked up, it's more than 150 years old. Of course, it's the men's final today. But what is it about us, do you think, that we love our traditions so much?
I think we look back and it's cosy and warm. It's easy to forget all the strife and grief. And you look back with those rose-tinted glasses. And I've worked with what I call my day job in television, filming plays, and quite a lot of them have been Shakespearean plays. Don't really understand the language terribly well, but the things that they deal with, they're playing out on the stages today. You know, the same human topics we're all living through today, and maybe we should learn lessons by looking backwards more often.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, as someone that was kind of born in the mid-90s, I think there's I think there's a lot of people in my generation that essentially feel that effectively since the 2008 economic crash, there has been this relentless feeling of decline. And so kind of look to previous eras like the 90s and even the kind of 2000s as the last sense of optimism, this idea that things could only get better.
But that's interesting you say that. When it comes to something like Live Aid, you know, the 40-year anniversary, you know, we all will remember it in different ways. I remember watching it as a kid. Do you think, for your age, did you look at these pictures and think, well, what was that all about? Or does it have any resonance?
I think probably at the time people did think that, but as you kind of get older, I think when you look back,
I prefer more experience.
then you probably do look back with rose-tinted glasses and think that actually this was a time that was happier. In an era where we do talk a lot about kind of mental health and we talked about social media, and it feels like the kind of social fabric is fraying. So I think that particularly for my generation, we increasingly look back and think, oh, older generations had something that we've kind of lost.
Talking of looking back, Kay, we asked Ncuti why he left Doctor Who. Why did you leave Sky? It's great to have you with us here on the BBC, but are we allowed to ask?
Yeah, of course you can. 3:17 was very, very early, and I did it for a long time. 3:15, just too early. 3:19, just too late. 3:17 was the sweet spot.
That was your alarm clock.
That was my alarm clock,
3:17.
yeah, and you need to get up. There'll be dragons if you hit snooze. So I'm having a gap year.
A gap. Might you go back?
We'll see what happens. Never say never.
Well, Ncuti back in the TARDIS, you back at Sky. Who knows? Who knows? Never say never. Well, all three of you, thank you so much for your time this morning. It's been great having you with us. Thank you to all of our guests today. And, of course, most of you, but biggest thanks to you, get my words right, for spending your Sunday morning with us. I'll be with Paddy O'Connell a bit later on Sunday's newscast. There he is, saying goodbye to his guests on Radio 4. And do remember, if you're worried about any of the issues we talked about around online harm, there is lots of help out there and support. You can find that on the BBC website. Politicians might feel like they need help trying to find the balance between the risks and the reward of technology as it races ahead. probably faster than they can keep up. Age checks to protect kids online are on their way, and they could make a big difference. But this morning, the woman in charge of internet safety, the boss of Ofcom, Melanie Dawes, acknowledged more new rules might be needed in future to keep up. So watch this space. Next week will be our last show before politicians pack up for the summer. So I will look forward very much to seeing you next Sunday, if we haven't all melted away by then. Same time, same place.